Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sports Business Networks. And we have our speaker series today with Francesca Schuler. Francesca is joining us from the West Coast out in California. She is most recently, she was the CEO of InShape, one of the largest chains of fitness gyms in all of California. She's also the current president of the California Fitness Alliance. She's done a lot in business. And welcome to the show, Francesca. How you doing?
Great. Thanks so much for having me, Dave. Excited to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you. One of the things that we want to be able to do is we have a broad array of listeners, the people who are members of Sports Business Network. We have coaches, we have athletes, we have former athletes who are in business. So we have a wide array. What we want to really get into is your background of how you got started. How did you get into the leadership positions? I mean, being the CEO of InShape is a big deal. You also former positions with Bevmo and other companies that I want to talk about. But, you're coming out of Brown University. You're a rower at Brown, an athlete. You know what it's like to compete. What are you looking to do when you first get out of Brown?
Good question. It was a long time ago, unfortunately, but I do still remember. It was actually interesting because at the time when you and I were at Brown, we, the recruiting paths were pretty traditional. There was banking, consulting, and I knew early on that I wanted to lead teams. I was pretty motivated to do that. A lot of that, I think, is having been on a lot of teams, but I am a people person and like to work with and through others. So sales was a good route for me. So I ended up joining the Gallo Winery in their sales management program, which was an incredible experience. At the time, I think I was one of the first women that had ever joined. I spent 3 years being called in rooms every morning saying, gentlemen, and it was definitely, I would say, one of the most challenging sales management programs out there, but one of the best and still is today, because it really taught me the importance of sales. I think people don't realize when you're a leader, you are always selling. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that in the most positive way. You're selling a vision, you're selling performance, you're selling potential, you're selling your products, you're recruiting people to come join your team. And so getting experience in sales for me is my kind of first big job, or my first real job, I should say, after college, has been invaluable. And I still use those skills today. I also then, it was a sales management program. So 9 months after, starting as a sales rep, you then joined the management ranks and learned a lot of how to be a good manager and how to be a bad manager. When you're a junior manager, you make a lot of mistakes and you hopefully carry those forward with you. So for me, coming out of undergrad, I think looking for something that, it wasn't about what I wanted to do in terms of a business. It was much more the skills I wanted to develop. And I think as I recruit, as I talk to my kids, as I coach and mentor a lot of recent grads, there is a little bit of a misnomer of sort of follow your passion. My hope for all of us is we are passionate about many, many things. And so the way I really look at it is find a role that gives you energy, that on the days where work is overwhelming, because it's still called work, the days that you're doing, grunt work or things that don't make you that excited, there's enough in the role that gives you energy to keep going. And hopefully you're passionate about lots of parts of what you're doing, but it's still work. And so who you work with and what you do with the people that you work with is really what makes a great job. It's not, this is the perfect job for me in the perfect industry and the perfect role. I think that's impossible to find. And I hate to see all these recent grads with all this pressure to sort of pursue their passion, because, at 21, hopefully you have 50 passions. Hopefully at 50, you have 50 passions, and so finding an organization and a team where you can get a lot of energy and build skills, I think is a lot of what's guided my career choices along the way.
Well, it's interesting, to me, hearing your story and knowing a little bit about the background, I wouldn't even look at thinking about a Gallo, I wouldn't think that they would have a great sales management program, but, here they do. Another one that I hear a lot of athletes going into is enterprise car rentals, that they have a great training program. And some of these training programs are phenomenal. I went through the Merrill Lynch system and I was a professional development coach for Merrill Lynch. And, we would put the the new trainees all through a system, it's really important, I think, for a lot of athletes that are out there that are looking either for their first job or looking to change into a different career, that looking at what are the paths and what companies have different routes that I could follow that will help me get to where I need to be. Where I'm not just getting into a job and I'm working this 9-to-5 job and that's it. And that's all I do. And I do the same daily task every day. I think that's what bores people, and people want to look at it and say, well, where can I truly take my talents that I have and take them to the next level? You've already talked about teamwork a couple times, and the power of, working within a team. I mean, you were on a crew boat, and, with a crew boat, if everyone is not working, not only together, but in sync with one another, that boat doesn't go. And if anything, it tips over. You hit different problems while you're out there. But those things that you used as an athlete, how much fun were they for you to see them, that you could actually develop them in this training program or this management program that you were in?
Well, I think playing on a team, and I will put in a pitch, though I realize we're talking on the Sports Network. My daughter is a theater major, and if you're a creative person and you're part of, let's say, theater, and you're putting on shows, it's a very similar environment. What you learn in high school and college being on a team is skills that you take with you for the rest of your life. And so I use a crew boat analogy all the time as a leader. Almost every new role I've taken, particularly when I've joined organizations that are quite siloed, and part of my role is to reduce the silos, is I use the analogy of a boat all the time, because you're right. It's one person rows wrong and the whole thing falls over. But the magic you feel when everyone's rowing together there's no feeling like it in the world. It's incredible. Just like when you play an amazing lacrosse game and everyone's playing the right position, knows their plays, basketball, football, every sport. And when I think being on a team is quite hard in the workplace. And so I see a lot of people get frustrated, particularly often athletes who are used to having like a playbook, right? So they have a great coach who coaches them individually and collectively, and they have like a set of playbooks. And in the workplace, there's often not as much a playbook approach, right? Every business problem is different. You have some guidelines. And I would say one of the things, I love hiring athletes, first of all, so I'm a huge fan of sports backgrounds, but I do see one of the places early on people struggle is they don't understand why it's not all working so smoothly. They're like, I understand my role. Don't you understand your role? Why we are not working together? And one of the pieces of coaching I give new graduates or people early in their career is really think about a couple things. Don't just assume everyone around the table understands the situation the way you do. And it's not just about listening, it's really walking in other people's shoes. And if I think about a lesson that I learned the hard way through my career about teams, is that I often assumed I know my place, just like I knew my row, my seat on the boat, or you knew your position on the field. When you're an athlete, you don't cross train as much. You have your position, you do really well at it. And I think I would encourage athletes to, early in their career, really think about what other people's roles are and understand their roles. And I say walk in other people's shoes quite literally, in that imagine yourself, let's say you graduate and you join the sales management program like I did. And then you have to interact with a marketing person, and the marketing person is saying things you're like, I have no idea how this person thinks that's going to be relevant. Take the time to understand their job, ask them their why, ask them why they, what their incentives are, their KPIs, or, what they're looked at to be successful on. And if you do that early in your career, you can bring all the skills that you brought as a team player, as an athlete, but apply them to business. It's not exactly the same. And I think the best advice I can give around being a team player early on is, as I said, kind of really take the time to understand the other functions you work with, understand what they do, understand why they do what they do, understand what goals they're trying to achieve and how you can contribute to that. Versus, and I made this mistake, full transparency, multiple times where I was like, well, I know my play. Why don't you know your play? What's your problem? You know, and it's easy then all of a sudden start pointing fingers versus saying, I don't really understand what's happening. Well, it's not working well. I need to better understand everybody else's position on the team. And so, like I said, I think being an athlete with team experience is invaluable, but you do need to make some shifts when you get into business. And the sooner you learn that, I think the more successful you'll be.
You know, it's interesting. You know, one of the things that, you know, it pops into my head as you're saying some of these things is it's also making sure that all of the team members are in sync with one another. And, you know, I was helping run a company and I was the CEO of a company, and my partner at the time, we were involved in it was a financial product, and also in the insurance space. And it was a hard product to actually explain. It's called captive insurance. And a lot of people, when you're trying to explain what captive insurance is, it's a form of self-insurance. But even when Jerry would explain it and when I would explain it, we would almost explain it in two different ways. But then when we would drill down to all the team members, and if we had to ask the team members to explain what a captive was, I don't think we got one explanation that was the same as any other explanation. And that made us think like, wow, we're not all on the same wavelength, and we need to be. And that was something that I learned, you know, even from trial and error, is that, you know, you got to be on the same wavelength, and you have to know what's going on in your company culture and everything that's going on. So
totally agree. I think, you know, I use this, I'll tell a quick story. Actually, something that really changed my leadership style. I have a couple, but I'll tell one now. And one is I worked in management consulting for a while after I graduated from business school. And there was a senior partner, one of the founders of the firm, who was just like one of the smartest people I've ever met. And anytime you'd go to him, he would be so amazing at explaining things to you. To your point, like you think you understand it, you're kind of embarrassed to admit to your manager you don't know. And he was just, no matter how many times I asked him the same question, he was gracious every single time. And when he passed away, I went to his funeral, and almost to the person, the way everyone described him was, we called him Dr. Bill, was that he always assumed goodwill. And that phrase has stuck with me for so long as a leader, as a team member, is to always assume goodwill, because once you have that mindset, it actually opens up how you interact with people, your peers on a team, as well as the people that report to you. So when someone, to your exact example, if someone doesn't understand the product, you could be like, you didn't listen to me, you didn't read the brochure, you didn't pay attention in training. Imagine if you take the mindset that says, let's assume goodwill. This person really wants to understand it and doesn't. Probably on me, number one. I need to figure out a better way to explain it, or we need to redo our training program, or we need to figure out why they don't understand it. And so I find that it's such a simple phrase, but I think so many leadership books are written about, you know, all the obvious things about being a leader. You have to be focused, you have to prioritize, you have to be motivating, all these things. And for me, what's helped me in my career is some simple moments like that have changed how I interact with people that I lead, or people that I'm on teams with, or even people that I report to. And assuming goodwill, I think, is an incredibly powerful leadership tool that when you're a competitive person, it's really powerful, because when you're a competitor, you want to win. And I am competitive, and I'm not ashamed of being competitive. I think being competitive is important, but it can be destructive at times. And if you balance being competitive and wanting to win with an assumption of goodwill, that when something's not working, it's like, let me assume everyone's trying to get this done. Let me help figure out why they're not doing it. It's just a simple tactic that I would definitely share with the audience, that I wish I'd learned it way earlier in my career than I did. But I definitely use it every day now, and has made me a better leader along the way. 100%.
Dr. Bill, assume goodwill.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Really powerful though for me.
But what's interesting, and I could even see it in your face as you're talking about him, you know, your face lit up as you were talking about him. And what's interesting is, you know, you had such a positive interaction with him when you would go to him with questions, concerns, advice, and things like that. And it was the way he treated you and made you feel that gave you this, you know, forever positive views of your relationship with him. So it's the same thing when you're looking at it. You know, are you the person when someone comes to you, you know, as I'm listening to you tell the story, and I'm listening, am I like that when someone comes to me? Or am I
And that's
sure?
and that's why I think about it. It's, there's been a few, when we were chatting before we started, what's the one thing someone said to me? And I'm not sure it's one thing. It's lessons like this that have been hugely valuable, for sure, that have shaped my own leadership journey, I would say. A second one, just building on, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go on. Second thing you were saying.
I was going to say a second one that, since we're talking about competition and being competitive, I would say, the idea of competing, not comparing, is really important early on. And so I had joined a company.
But how hard is that? I'm sorry to cut you off, but how hard is that in today's world, especially for the youngest generation, where isn't social media all about comparing?
100%. It is hard. And so I joined a company as the head of marketing, and they had gone through multiple heads of marketing. So, I would say a tough culture, not one that people had a lot of trust in the leadership, et cetera. And promotions were announced basically via the phone list. So the phone list would get reissued, and you could hear just crickets as everyone's reading through to see who got promoted, who got to be a coordinator, who got to be an associate, who got to be a manager. And then inevitably, some happy and some really pissed off people. First of all, really bad way to communicate promotions. Let's leave that aside for a second. But what I learned from that is I would then have a steady stream of people in my office just so angry around why they didn't get promoted, and not able to hear what they needed to work on to progress. And I've definitely been there as well. I mean, I remember sitting in some reviews, only hearing, the negative and not hearing the positive, which is quite destructive. And I think learning how to think about competing versus comparing is really important to being successful as a leader. And the way I try to think about it is a great competitor understands the game, understands the drivers of the game, understands what's expected of themselves, shows up for their team. I mean, it's exactly what we all did as athletes. It's quite simple, the formula to be a good competitor. Now, whether you have natural athletic ability or not, but you can practice and get better. But I think we lose sight of some of that, that type of competitiveness that we felt on the field when we enter the workplace. And all of a sudden, we're sort of competing against our own team members. And if you actually go back to what it was like to being on a team in high school or in college and think about, do I understand the game? Do I understand the goal? Do I understand the plays? Do I understand my role on the team and what I'm supposed to contribute? And do I feel that responsibility? And do I understand everybody else's roles? And do I realize, like, working together, we will be better than me trying to, run ahead? It's like, if I tried to row faster than everybody else in the boat, it would never work. Do you know what I mean? It would just never work. And it's a really valuable mindset. And I catch myself, because I'm still, I do find myself comparing still, even now. But I use that phrase. I actually have it, I have a couple phrases, and that's one that I have just like on my notebooks, et cetera, to just remind myself that healthy competition, there's nothing better. But when it moves into comparison and being like, well, why did they get this? And why did they get this? Right. And why did they get this? And even if it's not within your own company, if you're treating your own competitors that way, well, how come they're do better versus, okay, I need to strategically think about why they're winning and how I'm going to beat them. It's just a very different mindset. And I think that that's a skill set that so many athletes have in college and in high school, but we lose sight of when we get in the workplace, because we're feeling it's like, I got to get promoted, I got to make more money, et cetera. And if you can hang on to that healthy competition mindset versus a comparison mindset, I think you'll be surprised at how fast your career will progress.
Well, it's interesting. I love documentaries. I love sports documentaries. I'm in the middle of watching The Man in the Arena with Tom Brady right now on ESPN. And one of the takeaways that I got during their run of when they were with the Patriots, where they won 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, was the competitiveness that they had intra-team, the intra-team competitiveness. And it was the offense versus the defense, where they would push each other to be the best they could be, where it would be Tom Brady would, come in and someone would be walking into the gym at 6:30 in the morning, and Tom Brady would be like, 6:30? I've been here since 6. You're already a half hour behind me. You did 25 push-ups. I did 50. And they would just push each other. And that's why they had such an incredible competition on their team, that team competition made them the best team, and a dynasty in the NFL. because they all pushed each other. They weren't comparing to each other.
Correct.
They were competing with one another to be the best that they could be. They were getting more out of one another. That's what they were doing.
And that's a great team, in my opinion. And that's where I think that mindset of losing that comparison mindset, which to your exact point is so hard in today's day and age, because between social media and everything being out there, it's hard. But I wasted time comparing early in my career. And if I could do it again, that would be I wasted energy. You waste energy on it, worrying about other people versus helping other people be better and yourself.
You think that's more of a female overall view where females are more comparing to one another than they are competing with one another? And is that a disadvantage being a woman in the workplace where someone looks at you and like, look at her, she's so competitive. They might call you the B word, they might look at you as, you're ultra competitive. How do you mix that?
So two separate points there. I don't think it's a female characteristic to compete more versus compare. I've seen it in both. I've worked in mostly primarily male industries, and tried to change them to a great extent to be more diverse. And so I see healthy and unhealthy competition amongst, it's gender neutral. I think if your question is, how do you be a strong woman in the workplace? That is changing, but still a challenge. I won't deny it. It is still, I'm still surprised, at my age and my level, and finding myself in situations where I get, feedback that would never be given to a male counterpart. How do you navigate that? I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. I think my approach has been to ignore it as much as possible and just keep doing the right thing. I think if you treat people well and you deliver results, that's what carries you through. And if you got a few people kind of make some snarky comments, you got to ignore it. In fairness, there are people that it does derail their career because someone is comparing themselves to this person and looking for lots of ways to win and saying negative things. That's a tougher situation, and one that I think has to be handled either with your direct manager or your HR department, et cetera. But I do see it changing a lot. It's a lot better now than it was. But it's still there. And I guess my approach has been to kind of say, it's not going to slow me down. And there's days I complain about it. But for the most part, I've found that if you treat people well as a leader and as a team member, if you know your business and you work on delivering results, with people, through people, that could just become noise and you ignore it. It has not been a situation where it's held me back. I don't think. It's just been annoying more than anything.
Right. No, I can imagine. I could find that very annoying. As the father of 3 daughters, I'm a big, pro women's rights for everything. So I look at it and just like, how can we help these young women today navigate these fields? Yeah. Did you find in your roles that you had, did you find any mentors in your workplace or outside of the workplace that played a key role for you?
Yeah, I had several. I mean, I get asked this question a lot. Who are your mentors? And, they were different at different stages of my life. Probably my biggest mentors from a day-to-day standpoint have been my husband and my kids. And the reason I say that is they keep my true north. So when I find myself getting caught up in whatever I'm caught up in, I always come back to sort of what matters the most to me, which is my family. And that's been quite helpful. So in some respects, that's what I think a mentor is. It's the people that call you on your BS, which my family definitely does, which I appreciate. And I ask them to, and also keeps me grounded. So I would say my family and keeping them as a priority has been a key mentor. A lot of my friends, actually, some of my classmates from Brown, to be honest, roommates from Brown, when I have moments of either lack of confidence, maybe too much confidence, not knowing what to do, I pick up the phone and call my classmates from Brown, and they've known me my whole life, just as you have, not my whole life, but we've known each other for a long time. So we know our strengths and weaknesses, and we can definitely help each other navigate it in a really honest way. I have had some leaders that
it's almost like you've created a personal board of advisors.
I have, but they're not. I think everyone thinks it has to be a CEO of a company. I mean,
no, it doesn't.
It's the people that know you the best. I think former coaches can be, I'm a mentor to a lot of people who've worked for me in the past. And I think the role of a mentor is someone who can, as I said, call you on your BS, give you advice when you're not feeling good about yourself, which happens to all of us, temper you maybe a little bit when you're feeling too good about yourself, and also present options. I think one of the things that mentors do, a good mentor does, is says, okay, well, if I'm hearing you say you really want to do this, well, here's kind of 3 or 4 ways to think about that, versus you have to do this or you don't have to do this. I think a great mentor always thinks about presenting options, not making the decisions for you.
Right.
So I have definitely had leaders who have done that for me and invested in me, taken risks on me. And so I feel incredibly fortunate for all the people who have helped me in my career. And I try to do my best to do the same for others, because I think Maya Angelou has a great quote, but people aren't going to remember what you said, but they're going to remember how you treated them. I butchered that quote a little bit, but that's what a great mentor does. They treat you well along the way.
Yeah, they're not going to remember what you said. They're going to remember how you made them feel.
How you made them feel. That's it. Close. Exactly. And I think a great mentor, even if the conversation is tough, they make you feel better at the end, because you're like, God, I totally needed that. And so I've been really fortunate with all the advisors I have, but I encourage particularly younger people, don't look too far afield. It could be your roommate from college. It could be your dad. It could be an aunt. It could be your first manager. It could be someone that works for you. I have people that work for me that have taught me more, that I view as mentors as well. So I think there's pressure to seek this sort of very fancy, big name mentor. And
my first mentor was fancy and big named. My first mentor was Thomas Watson Jr., who was the CEO and chairman of IBM. He gave me my scholarship to Brown, and we ended up forming this incredible relationship. And when I was out of Brown, I was working at Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, and I was thinking about going to law school. And I always went to him for advice, and he said, come up to meet me. I went to his offices up in Armonk, and he slid a piece of paper across the table to me. And I opened it up. It was on his stationery. And it said, law school's paid for. And I was like, oh my God, I can't even believe this. This guy paid for me to go to college. Now he's paying for me to go to law school. But he said, this one has 2 strings attached. 1, you have to do this for another kid down the road and pay it forward. And 2 is you have to convince me why you want to be a lawyer. And I went through my whole spiel on why I wanted to be a lawyer. And he took the envelope back from me with the letter in it and basically ripped it up. He said, you don't want to be a lawyer. You just don't want to work at Hong Kong Shanghai Bank anymore. And he said, don't ever run from something, run towards something. And I went from this euphoric state where I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. I just had law school paid for. And I was walking out of his office with my tail between my legs. And he said to me, listen, there are going to be times in life when you're on the ladder of life and you cannot figure out how to get up to the next rung. In those times, it's when you have to have the most faith. You have to let go of the ladder and reach one hand up. And when you reach that hand up, someone's going to grab you and they're going to pull you up to the next rung. But as soon as you get up to the next rung, you better put your hand back down and pull up the next person behind you.
Agree. It's great. And I think you happen to have a big name mentor, but I'm sure in those moments when you were having a conversation, he was just someone who did exactly what he did. He helped you figure out what you wanted to do.
One of the most down to earth people I've ever met in my life.
Yeah.
And literally would give you advice that you needed.
Right.
It would have been easy for him as a multi-millionaire to be able to just pay for me to go to law school and be done with it and have a nice deed. But he didn't want to do that. He looked at me and wanted to know where I was going. What was the next?
Right.
What was best for Dave Katowski? And going to law school wasn't right for me. And he knew it.
I think there's 2 parts of that story, though, which I think I use this analogy back since we're talking about the importance of, being an athlete or playing sports. I think being a coach, but also being coachable is really important. And it sounds like your conversations were, he was a great coach to you, but you also let yourself be coached. And often in leadership, I think it's easy to lose sight of becoming a better leader is allowing yourself to be coachable as well. And I use this a lot with my teams, this idea of, people ask me, I want to be a great leader. I'm like, okay, well, you don't wake up one day being a great leader. We're all every day working on trying to be a better leader. And I think leadership starts in your first job and it's a journey for the rest of your life. But I use this expression, kind of be a coach and be coachable all the time, because really a great leader is a great coach. there's a lot of parts of being a leader of a company that no one ever wants to know about or do. But what makes you a great leader, I think, is you're really more of a coach. You help people see their potential, see where they may have made mistakes, give them feedback, help them with plays in their life. I mean, just like on a field, help design something that's for them, but also make sure they fit in. But I think also great leaders are coachable. They take feedback. When someone says like, this isn't working, they don't just dig their heels in and say, yes, it is, I'm the leader and I know.
Right.
And so I love this balance of the idea of being a great coach and being coachable as sort of a foundation for leadership. And I use that a lot with more junior team members who are sort of trying to figure out when they're going to become a leader. And I'm like, well, I know people who at 22 are great leaders. Doesn't mean they're the CEO of the company, but
Right.
they're a great leader and they share some of these skills because they know how to coach others, but they let themselves be coached as well. And hearing that story, that was such a great moment of coaching and being coachable, which I love.
I talk about coachability all the time. I mean, I talk about it with my athletes. What do college coaches want? College coaches want coachable athletes. They want people who are going to be able to listen to them, take the advice that they're giving them, put it into action, and see where it fits into the overall plan for the team. And staying on that team focus, you go from Gallo, you eventually become the chief marketing officer for Bevmo, and Bevmo, for those people who don't know who Bevmo is, it's literally one of the largest. Why don't you explain who Bevmo is?
Specialty beverage. Yes. No, well, if your point is that I jumped industries, I have. I started in wine, but then I went to the Gap. Then I went to Method Products, which is eco-friendly. I went back to a wine company. Bevmo is a large specialty beverage retailer that has everything from, super high-end tequila, all kinds of the sodas you always want to find, as well as lots of snacks. It's kind of a party store out here in California, mostly on the West Coast. And then I switched from that to fitness. So yes, I have had quite a journey, and I get asked a lot about that. They're like, whoa, and why? And I always tell people it was kind of a combination, I think a little bit of sort of luck and timing, but most of all, I've learned sort of early on what gave me energy. And I'm definitely a people person. So I like multi-unit businesses where you have clubs or stores or restaurants. I haven't been in the restaurant business, but I could see loving that. I like serving consumers. I like creating experiences with a team. I'm not I probably can't imagine myself in a pure tech environment selling enterprise software systems that you can't look and feel and touch, though they're hugely important and I've implemented them, and I learned that early on. So when you kind of know that's what you like creating experiences, you like interacting with people, you can do it in a broad range of industries. I mean, I switched to fitness because while I liked alcoholic beverage, I had 2 kids, one heading into high school. And I also was ready to do something that made people's lives a little bit better beyond the product that I sold. And so I always say alcohol is great. It makes your life better for a little bit of time, but fitness can change your life for the rest of your life. And so it was an intentional switch on my part. I had gotten to a stage where that's what I wanted to do, something in a wellness or health category, and fitness worked out really well.
Well, I remember one time I was running the Long Island Lizards professional lacrosse team. And, one of our coaches said a great quote. He said, the difference between being a head coach and assistant coach is assistant coaches make suggestions, head coaches make decisions. Yeah, and you become the CEO of a huge fitness company. And now you are the one who's making the decisions. It's not just the suggestions anymore. The suggestions are now coming to you. How did you navigate that new role?
Great question. And I had sort of tale of 2 cities because I had the role and then the pandemic hit, and that was a whole different ball game being a CEO in that. Asked a lot of questions. I think that's a lot of it. I think going in assuming I didn't know everything is really important. I was grateful I had joined in Shape originally as a CMO, became the COO, and then became the CEO. So I had a track record of relationships and trust that had been built. And I was so grateful for that as a new CEO, because people gave me permission a little bit to not know everything. I also did know the business versus if I joined initially as a CEO and having never been in it. So I definitely had some tailwinds in my direction.
Sure.
But I think a lot of it's the team. I mean, look, a CEO is, it's a great job. It's a lonely job at times, because to your point, the decisions, ultimately there's calls you have to make, some amazing calls and some challenging calls. But the decision does stop with you. And so it can be a lonely job. And the way I helped navigate it was surround myself with just top talent. I had an amazing executive team around me who complimented me in many ways. I could never have been successful without them. And I had an amazing team below them and an amazing team below them, and really spent a lot of time on culture and organization. I think it's easy as a CEO to focus just on the numbers, which is really important. 100%, you got to perform. But the way I think about it is it starts with people. If you build a great team and you make your consumers, or in our case, our members happy, your results are going to come. And if you keep that mindset of priorities, I think you can always drive short-term results ignoring people. You can. It's super easy to do, but they're short-term results. If you want to build a long-term sustainable company, you've got to really focus on kind of defining the culture, walking the talk, and making sure that it's an organization where people feel part of something and that they are contributing something, both positive and helping to solve problems. And so that was sort of part of my leadership mindset. I mean, I believe there's potential everywhere. And so that's definitely part of what my leadership footprint. I see potential in a lot of places. So I asked many people to take roles they had never imagined. I was like, I think you're really good at this. I think you'll like it. And they were like, what? And then ended up being really successful. So, but it comes down to the team, in my opinion. A successful leader is only as good as the team around them. And I learned that. I mean, just, we had a really successful, a record-breaking 2019. And in March 2020, we closed due to pandemic, and we had no revenue for 15 months. And I'm not going to go through the whole long, sad story of running fitness companies in California, but let's just say it was really challenging. And throughout the 18 months of that, we did not lose one leader, despite having to furlough people for a while and bring them back. We didn't lose one leader in the organization or one of our general managers. And I would not recommend it as a test of culture to anybody ever. But it showed that we had put in the right foundation. And I saw extraordinary things done by people to help us navigate through that I will be eternally grateful for. Just really extraordinary things. So it was the hardest time of my life, but I saw the best in so many people during it as well. So
that's amazing. That's awesome. But, you're talking about, the decision-making role as the CEO, but you also sit on the board of a bunch of different companies.
I do.
And,
I do.
So in that role, you're much more an advisor where you are making the suggestions. So you're getting the best of both worlds.
I am. Board roles is interesting. I think there's a lot of misinformation about what it means to be on a board. The real role of a board is to make sure the company follows appropriate governance, is to advise a CEO. And as an operator, you have to make sure you don't offer too many advice, too many suggestions, right? I mean, the CEO has a team to do it. So I tend to, the boards I'm on are more middle market companies that are in growth phase and need kind of a level of expertise of people who have run bigger companies. And you can provide suggestions or exposure to things that if you've grown up in a smaller company, you'll never have seen before. And so that's a lot of what it is. It's like, hey, here's a couple different ways to look at it that I've done or seen at other places that may be helpful. So that's a lot of what you do.
Let me ask you this, it's 2021, we're about to go into 2022 and have, hopefully our greatest year ever going forward.
Dave, hang on 2 seconds. My AirPods just switched to my phone. I don't know why. So I lost you. So give me 1 second. Not sure why that happened. Sorry.
No problem.
Let's see. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
I don't know what happened. It just switched all of a sudden. So
that's okay. That's technology. That's technology for you.
Yes.
But if you were looking at it today and you're looking at a young woman who's an athlete who's currently in college, maybe not sure of what their career path should be, what piece of advice could you give them to help them kind of navigate this whole process of careers and life?
Yeah, great question. So a couple things. I think I would, I literally just did this with my nephew, but ask a series of questions of sort of what gives you energy. Are you a people person? Do you like being around people? Do you not like being around people? Are you someone who, are there certain industries or types of products that you just naturally gravitate to in your personal life, not necessarily from a company? Because I think people can easily say, I really want to work for this company, and actually hate everything about that job, but it's just a big name. So are there things that sort of give you energy around, consumer products? Do you like technology? Do you like, banking or financial services? Are there things that you're not, just naturally more interested? If you're reading a blog or reading the newspaper, which nobody online, because nobody does that old school anymore. Are there certain articles that you tend to be drawn to? Because part of it's just discovering kind of what your natural affinity is. So that's one thing I ask. I definitely ask, help people think about, are you someone that wants to be on a team, be presenting, be active, i.e. sales, marketing, et cetera? Or are you someone who likes to kind of solve problems behind the scenes? So maybe wants to be in a finance department or a accounting or things like that. Those are not mutually exclusive, but I think sometimes people, they usually have a sense of what they think they like more. I really recommend trying to get a bigger name on your resume in your first job if you can. And the reason I say that is you brought up earlier, a training program is invaluable. It's super sexy to want to go work for a startup. I hear this all the time, but I'll get to do a little bit of everything. And I'm like, yes, but in 2 years, you'll go interview for a job and no one will think you can do anything because you'll have done a little bit of everything, but a whole lot of nothing. And so there are definite benefits to go to a small company. So if that's what you choose to do, great. But I think being part of a larger organization for your first few years out of undergrad is really valuable. You learn a whole slew of skills beyond just your job. You learn how to be in a team, be in a really diverse organization, what HR is all about, how to present, because not only are you presenting, but you see other people presenting.
Sure.
You get exposed to a little more structure, which in the end, structure does help. It doesn't have to be corporate bureaucracy, but structure is helpful in getting things done. And seeing that in the works in a bigger company can be really helpful. So I give that advice. I say talk to everybody. I mean, my daughter's a senior in college now, but I'll introduce her to anybody. She's learned to sort of ask anyone, call anyone who was graduated the previous year. Do you like your job? What do you do?
Right.
You know what I mean? And everyone wants to help. People are always like, I'm so sorry. Thank you for your time. I'm like, look, it's my pleasure. People did this for me. Paying it forward is what it's all about. And so I don't know anyone who does not want to help a recent grad figure out what they want to do with their next few years of their life, not the rest of their life, but their next few years. So pick up the phone, send an email, send a text, reach out. I love what you're doing with the Sports Business Network, because hopefully that'll just create an easy network for people to reach out. They'll have some common language like, oh, I played lacrosse at wherever, or I rode here. It gives you an opener. I see my daughter doing that. She's at the theater school at USC. She'll call anyone who's in a theater, who's done theater or something creative, and there's an instant connection, even if they don't know each other. So
Absolutely.
reach out.
That's the whole idea behind it.
Mm-hmm. And remember that it's not the rest of your life. You are looking for something for the next couple years to help you define the next couple years to help you define the next couple years. Unless you want to be a doctor, you want to be a lawyer. For most of us, it's a journey of discovery. And I personally think it's fun. If I had to pick kind of 3 characteristics that I encourage everyone to keep and have made me successful, it's pretty simple. 1, stay curious, be curious, stay curious, read, listen to podcasts, ask questions, meet with people, laugh. Don't take yourself so seriously. It's just, your first job or your second job. It's not the end of the world. But then when you do it or in your process of doing it, get shit done. Be a doer, get shit done. And those are the 3 things, if I see that in a candidate, I don't care where they've worked, what they've done. If I see those 3 characteristics, I'm like, I want to hire this person. Right. And so I think the biggest mistake people make is they lose curiosity. They're not curious enough. And if you're curious, you'll discover something about yourself or something about a company or an opportunity that you never thought about. But if you don't go after it with a curious mindset, you're not going to have as many options as you are if you're curious about it.
Yeah, I mean, well, listen, this is it. This is exactly why we do the interviews like this. So it's like it's another opportunity for these athletes that are all part of our community for them to learn from people like you who have played various roles in your life already and getting advice on ways to navigate this system. That's exactly what we want to be able to do. We want to provide life advice to help these athletes be the best that they can be in whatever they want to do,
Right.
whatever they
Agree.
want to do.
Agree. The book I'd recommend to everyone. I love Abby Wambach's book, Wolfpack. For those who have not read it,
Oh
cannot
my God.
recommend it more
Love it.
highly. It's a simple, easy, great leadership tips. I mean, she talks about leading from the bench, which I could not agree with more, and a few others. So highly recommend that to men and women. I think it's a great kind of approach to navigating your first few years in your career. So highly recommend that.
I
One of
remember
several.
Abby when I watched Abby Wambach when she gave that commencement speech.
Yep.
And she
Yeah.
talked about, I forget which player it was on the USA team, but Abby was just a young player on the team, and they were just playing like 6-on-6 or 5-on-5 soccer. And here they have someone who's been on the USA team for maybe 2 or 3 times. And finally, when the game was getting just too close, she kept on saying, "Give me the effing ball."
I know.
And just like, and she said it was so empowering to see this leader on the field just say, "Give me the ball, let me get
Right.
it done."
Right.
And I think it's a great testament, especially for the women out there. Don't be afraid
100%.
to take the ball. Don't be
Agree.
afraid to take the ball.
I agree. And don't say you're sorry all the time.
Yeah.
That is definitely, I see that in the workplace all the time. I'm sure if anyone who worked for me listened to this, they will laugh because I say it all the time. But there are some tendencies that do occur. There's a lot that are not gender specific, but there are some. But anyway, I think Abby's book is great. So I recommend that to people a lot.
Well,
Because I think
we're gonna
it
have to
has
have you back on. We're gonna have to have you back on the show and just do one of your leadership classes like you've done in the corporate world. We'll have to do that. But let me finish up by asking you the question that we ask every guest is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten and who gave it to you?
I think the best advice is probably from my dad, who was not in business, was a lawyer and very academic, but he would always remind me that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I keep those words. I forget them sometimes, but and that applied to my career, to apply to my life, to being a mom. But he was always reminding us that it is a marathon, not a sprint. And if you take a longer view, you don't get as ruffled on the mistakes and the bumps in the road, of which there are many. Two, you make smarter decisions, I think, because you think about, what do I want the long game to look like? Not, am I getting promoted tomorrow, or, is
Sure.
my kid perfect tomorrow, et cetera. So, my dad was a huge influence on me. So I think he definitely shaped who I am to a great extent. Both my parents were, but my dad in particular. And that definitely is advice that has stuck with me for a long time. And I'm passing it down to my own kids as well, as they're impatient on their next chapters, whatever those are. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, listen, Francesca, we really appreciate you having on the show. We're going to have you back again. I'm sure
great.
of that. I'm sure there's so many people that are going to just take so many nuggets and tidbits of advice that you've given today. So we really appreciate you having on the show, and best of luck in 2022. So you have the best year possible.
Thanks, Dave. You too. And if I'm happy, anyone who wants to reach out via LinkedIn, Francesca Schuler, just message me. I'm happy to help. So thank you for having me. I love what you're doing. And I think it'll make a big impact on helping people navigate their careers. So it's great to see you, Dave. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. And we are out today with Sports Business Network. And this has been a great episode with Francesca Schuler.